This is Jakarta. The capital of Indonesia, and this city is sinking. People, especially the poor, are practically living in water here. Once a coastal region filled with lush green forests and trees, today Jakarta looks as if it has been painted entirely in grey. A massive mistake made in Jakarta has had devastating consequences for its people. Which country put them in this situation? Life in Jakarta is coming to an end, and the city is sinking. This is the Al Duna Mosque in Jakarta. People last prayed here in 2001. Today, it is submerged in water and completely ruined. The mosque stands just outside a seawall built along the city's coast, and it is predicted that very soon it will be entirely underwater. That's because the sea level in Jakarta keeps rising every year. But what I'm talking about here is not just related to global warming or melting glaciers. Let me show you with a map. This map shows how much of the city is underwater today. If we go back in time and divide this process into certain time periods, we can see how quickly the city has sunk. A process that began in 1997 reached massive proportions by 2017. The dark blue areas represent parts that have sunk 3 to 4 meters, and this is only increasing. Calculations show that the ground sinks by about 20 to 25 centimeters every single year. Normally, people want to live near the sea. In fact, houses in coastal areas are usually very expensive. But this is not the case in Jakarta. In this city, living in some coastal areas is actually much cheaper than living inland. When we look from above, we can see that poor people have built makeshift homes along the coast. Most of these people rely on fishing to survive, but they fear for their future because of the rising waters. Many businesses in coastal areas have already shut down, and people are literally living on water. So, what is the real reason Jakarta is sinking? The biggest problem is the city's population growth, which has led to excessive groundwater extraction. Nearly 60% of the population relies on groundwater wells. Those without access to piped water depend on underground aquifers, constantly digging new wells. Since they can't get clean tap water, water companies are draining these underground reserves like a giant hose every single day. As a result, the ground starts collapsing. Imagine one of these wells as an opening. The soil between the ground layers acts like a sponge. The more water is taken out, the more it compresses, and eventually the bedrock collapses. The ground above, meaning the city itself, then sinks. In a previous video, I showed how sinkholes in Konya, Turkey, formed in a very similar way. People using groundwater there created empty spaces underground, and in time, giant sinkholes appeared. Jakarta is experiencing the exact same thing, but this problem goes way back. In the 1600s, European kingdoms colonized the world and took control of Indonesia from its rightful owners. Their idea for the city was to reduce flooding and separate different groups of people through a canal system, essentially dividing lower-class citizens from themselves. This was the beginning of colonial urban planning. Soon, irregular water flow caused sediments to block the canals. The clogged canals became breeding grounds for diseases. The Europeans realized it wasn't working and moved south, abandoning Batavia, today's Jakarta, to the very diseases they had caused. The blockages continued, deadly epidemics spread, and many people died. Instead of fixing the canals, the Dutch began using water pipes in the south. In the 1870s, they started distributing water to homes through underground iron pipes. Water meant life, and for them, life was now good. But the abandoned locals struggled to survive. Without clean water, people settled wherever they could find it, leading to irregular and unplanned settlements. They became dependent on those who found and sold water. A few decades later, some public fountains were built, but they were never enough. Years passed. After World War I, the Dutch eventually recognized Indonesia's independence. But according to reports, during that period, villages were burned, people were tortured and executed, and more than 100,000 Indonesians were killed by the Dutch. What they left behind was a city built on swamps and people struggling to find water. Batavia, modern Jakarta, kept growing. Canals were closed, skyscrapers rose, and the population exploded. The result of this irregular development is a city that regularly floods. When the country gained independence, only about 12% of the population had access to piped water. By 2015, that number had only increased to about 40%. Even today, many people still lack clean water and have no choice but to use groundwater, which keeps causing the city to sink. To protect Jakarta from rising seas, 3 to 4 meter walls have been built. From the sea, one thing becomes obvious. The city lies below sea level. Especially coastal Jakarta is about 1 meter below sea level. It's hard to predict how long these walls will last. Some are already leaking. The city is also prone to tides and monsoon floods, which makes the situation even more dangerous. For example, in 2007, Jakarta experienced massive flooding when rivers and canals overflowed, submerging countless homes. The Indonesian government's solution is to move the capital to another region, Borneo Island. But this will displace Borneo's other inhabitants, endangered species like gibbons, pangolins, and especially orangutans. Another proposed solution is to build a 120-kilometer seawall and transform Jakarta into a fortified mega-city, almost like an island city. But that would take 25 to 30 years to complete, by which time much of the land may already be underwater. Similar cities have been saved before. In the 1950s, Tokyo installed underground pipes and stopped the city from sinking. The same was done in Taipei, Shanghai, and Bangkok. Unless something changes in Jakarta, its people may face yet another catastrophe. There's a saying, digging your own grave. Jakarta's people are literally living that saying, digging their own wells to survive, but in doing so, dooming their city. Before you leave, don't forget to check the link in the description.